Hello and welcome to Pluck That. I'm Nick Ciraldo and I'm joined as ever with my co-hosts Mike Boyd and Jonathan Bass. We are here to talk about a couple of things. We're going to first get started with the news. We got to get that. like these like they used to have on was it Sesame Street?
Right.
Like,
The ticker going.
Hi ho, this is Kermit the Frog at Old MacDonald's farm.
We got to leave this all in though. Also, I have a tune that I wrote called "The News" that we always like to play.
Yes, you do. It's a good one.
Yeah, we could just put that in there. You know what I'm saying?
Is
Self
it?
promotion. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, let's do it. Hey, is that one of those that has a really cool video with it as well? Like there's like a
Oh,
music video.
Carl. Yeah, Carl did all those, man. He'll find his anything from Super 8s to random clips of, like probably public domain, probably not, honestly, and just, pair it up with, tunes for eye candy, on YouTube.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's
our
great about that.
our listeners need to check out Gritty City Bang Bang on YouTube to find some of the coolest juxtapositions of their music with very odd um video.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's fun. Anyway, I'll just tell you all about an experience that I had this past week. I'm friends with a high school English teacher. She teaches 12th grade English. They go through a lot of heavy hitting literature from plays to novels, short stories. And she thought it would be interesting to somehow tie music into a play that they're about to read. And because we're friends, she asked me. And it was a little challenging at first for me because, it's like, you're a musician, come to my class. And so you have to solve all these, microscopic problems from what to play, what to bring, the research needed to to into the literature that they're reading and that kind of a thing. But it ended up being a really special moment because I was able to learn a little bit about August Wilson and his play Fences, and the zeitgeist of all of his plays or many of his plays, kind of Pittsburgh 1950s, the culture, the people that were in that time and place, and that included in my as I learned in my research, George Benson. George Benson grew up in that community, and we all know and love his playing and music and many others. And so I visited the class. I brought my classical guitar, I brought my electric guitar, and I was playing along to some of the music. I with a loop pedal, I did some sort of jazz, self accompanied jazz, and played a little classical as well. And by the end, after we had discussed the blues and the kind of the birth of the blues and how far it's come along and how to write for the blues. And of course, it's a literature class, how to write lyrics for the blues, at least as much as I know about all that. The students were writing blues lyrics, and they were complaining about the teacher's essay requirements, in particular, the page number. And but it was cute. They really got into it. They were writing a lot of fun lyrics, and I just walked around the room, chunking chords, just playing some 12-bar blues with them. Even some of them brought in some instruments. And so I fortunately brought some manuscript paper and kind of wrote down accompaniment lines that they could play. And it was like ukulele, flute, French horn, beatboxer, just whatever was available. So it was a real creative moment. And I really salute the teacher for doing that. Shout out to Oak Grove High School for being open to that kind of thing. And yeah, I hope to be able to do something like that in the future.
Well, Nick, another thing that's really kind of interesting about that is how you really had to think on your feet in the moment in some regards there. And on top of that, two classes that were what, hour and a half long periods. That's that's quite a marathon.
Yes. I mean, normally when I visit a high school for recruitment purposes, the classes are 50 minutes long, 55 minutes long, something like that. And I see that as a much more sizable chunk during which I can play, talk about the music a little bit, talk about Southern Miss and move on. But an hour and a half is just, it feels like a considerably longer period of time. And then added to that is this completely new element, at least it was for me, that was to add some educational content. But yeah, it was totally worth it, Mike. It just really was worth it because to see the students getting so into it, to see them singing loudly their own lyrics, just made it all worth it. I came home exhausted and I told my wife, man, wow, just two classes and I'm just so tired. And she said, yeah, now imagine doing that every day, referring to all of the elementary, middle, and high school teachers that just do that day in and day out. So lots of admiration for them.
Well, great engagement opportunity with them as well. So that's something I've much like you when I've had to do things like that. It's let me give my little spiel, almost like a lecture recital, play for you, talk about it,
Yeah.
but really keeping them engaged like that. Kudos to that. That's really creative.
Thanks, man. Thank you. All right. I think that's it for news, if I'm not mistaken. And now it's time to get to rants. Rants. We have a special one for a very special occasion, don't we, gentlemen?
Yes,
Today
we
we're
do.
going to be, yeah, today we're going to be talking about
We're
weddings.
gathered here today
Yeah.
to talk about weddings.
Yeah, more specifically, wedding gigs, musical accompaniment to a wedding ceremony. The three of us have done many of them. I'm sure many of our listeners have done them. And so we wanted to just take a moment to talk about them a little bit. They're not the best engagement. I'll just start with that.
You inherit a lot of stress.
Being a wedding gig, being a wedding musician.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's
Especially for
that.
the ceremony. I mean, because not that it has anything to do with you, but it has everything to do with you. When it's time for you to play, and not to mention the fact that everybody organizing the thing is stressed out. And so it's just like if you're not in the right mindset or if you've not played enough of them, you can get pretty stressed out quickly too.
I was about to say, the part of the stress element on that is the coordination aspect of trying to not only pay attention to the music you're playing, but be respectful of whatever is going on around you, the people walking down the aisle, trying to cut things off or start at certain amounts of time. And like Jonathan said, a part of it is everybody's a bit on edge, and I think there is a bit of extra pressure, being that it's not about you, but it is about you because this is their special day, and you don't want to do something that can really muck it up.
Yeah. What's so shocking to me is how much goes into a wedding day, from the dress to everyone else's outfit for that matter, the decorations, the location, the catering, if you've been through a wedding or you've attended a wedding, all that goes into it. And yet almost at the last minute sometimes they'll contact you, the guitarist, and they're like, okay, we want you to play at this ceremony, we want you to do this, we want you to play for the processional and the recessional, and they give you not much more than that. Sometimes they give you a whole lot more, but the average gig is basically that. And so in the midst of all of that organization, all of that coordination, it's like a massive production. You enter in and you have to start playing during the most pivotal moment of the ceremony, like when the bride is walking down, and no one realizes that the long procession that everyone thinks it's going to be is really like 20 steps, unless you're getting married in like a massive cathedral. you got about 20 seconds, and there's probably a party walking down and, all this. But as a musician, you have to be like watching things happen by the second, and you have to start at the perfect spot. You got to play through, and then you have to end at the perfect spot. I
Yeah.
say you I say you have to. I mean, if you want to be a bad musician or a bad, professional and you don't really care, you can just do whatever you want. But if you really care about this and you want them to have a beautiful moment, you have to get it just right when she walks up and she joins they're like right there. And that takes skill and that takes awareness. And you also can't look at your guitar too much because you're looking around and reading the room.
Yeah, you have to, be mindful to pick the repertoire that allows you to do that too.
Right.
I mean, don't pick uh, the chaconne, while you're while people are being, seated and you're watching the wedding planner for a cue. You know what I mean? Like, so I mean, like that's not necessarily a rant to them. That's your own fault, for picking something that's too, difficult to play. But we're avoiding the rant.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
we're giving so much credit where credit truly is due to the people who are coordinating and the people whose special day it is, because we should. However, you also get those calls, hey, it's, the rehearsal's tomorrow. It's like,
Yeah.
well, okay, that's great. You didn't tell me about a rehearsal. I'm sure there was always going to be a rehearsal, but you didn't inform the musician that we would need to be,
Yeah.
and that's just one thing, or, oh yeah, we're going to need you to start 30 minutes earlier. It's
Yeah.
like, well, no,
Yeah.
that I'm on my way. Like, I'm kind of stealing your story, but it's happened to all of us. It's like,
Yeah, you kind of get relegated to like this help status, like a part of the
sure,
catering crew or something like that. Like,
which is fine. I mean, honestly, to an extent, it's fine. But there's also zero awareness, of anything that goes into what you do, when you're hired.
yeah,
But maybe that leads into one of the real concerns that many of us have when we are contacted about wedding gigs is, well, how much is it going to cost?
yeah,
Right.
And it is one of the more demanding scenarios, even if you're only playing 15 minutes of pre-ceremony music, maybe two or three pieces during the ceremony. You're not doing the after party. There's a lot of moving pieces that go into that where you want to be paid, you know, how you think what you think you're worth. But most of the time, there's so much more involved than you anticipated that for years I was very reticent about, wanting to charge what I really wanted and always feeling like I got underpaid for the effort that I put in. So a couple of years ago, I said, no more of that. This is what I want. This is my fee structure. And when someone would, contact me about it, I just immediately throw that number out. This is for what you're asking me to do. This is my number. And I thought, I'm probably going to get turned down for what I'm putting out there. And I've not gotten turned down once since I put that number out there.
Same. So I actually pretty much doubled my fee a few years back. Now don't get me wrong, it's not really something I get called for a lot, but it wasn't because of that. I got to a point where same thing. I stopped putting pressure on myself to pick like a nice repertoire, like I was, alluding to earlier. It's not that what I'm playing is bad or of less quality, but it's definitely not as demanding. And it just doesn't matter anymore. It's not about what I play. It's about my time and the stress that can potentially go into it. And so weddings have proven themselves for me over and over to, I'm not going to say not be worth it, but worth a premium,
yeah.
you know?
I think most people that are part of the wedding cottage industry feel a similar way almost because everything needs to be such next level. They need to charge to make sure that those things happen, whether it's the
Yeah.
the venue to the staff needed, the food quality. and so on. And so I think we're just part of that. I think we should be part of that. We should see ourselves as, oh, a wedding. Okay, this is a very special moment. You need to invest in it, as opposed to like background music at some party. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Um,
and I would say that I would make a distinction. You know, like if I'm showing up there with my trio to play the reception, I mean, it's still going to be a premium, but it's not going to be like the ceremony. You know, like I'm not going to charge as much, as I would for like a solo ceremony or a duo or whatever. The ceremony itself that's a premium, and that's just how it is from now on for me. And I don't mind not getting hired for it anymore. I just don't, It's it is what it is. Yeah.
yeah. And most of the time, wedding planners or the bridegroom, whoever's getting married, they will request not much. They just want music. But sometimes I've had the like, we want you to play this song and then follow it by this song and then do this song for the flower girl and then this song when I walk down and this song when we leave. And I'm like, that's extra
That
time.
that happened to me once, and from then on out, I was like, this is my fee, and if you want me to learn anything special, it's extra.
Oh wow. Okay.
100,
I
oh,
should
no, 100%.
I should try that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't, like I said, I don't play them much anymore, and again, I do not care. Like I'm happy to do it, but it is a premium because of everything that goes into it. You know, I'm happy to do it for that price.
Well,
That's
so
why
many times the music that they're requesting is not things that's in our standard, books that we cite read out of. We have to take the time before that to not only make our transcriptions and arrangements, but also then learn it on top of that. So I think that's one thing they don't think about is the extra time. It's not like we're just showing up. All of a sudden, the clock starts right then. There's sometimes weeks of preparation that goes into that.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean it's become a cliche now, but whether it's a wedding band or any kind of band for any sort of event, it's like, well, y'all only played an hour. It's like, no, 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 no. You're not paying me for an hour's worth of work. You're paying me for a lifetime's worth of practice to make that hour happen. You're paying me for an hour or more both ways on the beginning and end of that hour's worth of playing, of packing up and traveling and gas and everything. It's like, no, but I mean, like that we're talking about specifically weddings. Like we could easily get into just, gigging life,
Right, right. But yeah, no, it just so happens that most weddings are during peak, like weekend time, family time, whatever you want to call it,
right?
that you give up. Um, I hope this doesn't come across as egotistical, but you kind of touched upon it a little bit, Bass. It is an interesting experience to go from thinking about all my years of training, schooling, lessons, practicing, and then all the concerts given, all the lessons given, and just all that wisdom and the typically the respect that comes with that and the pre and post concert experience, and comparing that with showing up, rolling my little amp up, sitting down on some rickety chair and nailing the ceremony, but then at the end, like packing up, loading into my car, and driving home. No one saying a word to me afterward. You know, it's not humbling because I don't expect anyone to do anything, but it's just kind of an interesting
Yeah.
difference.
Hmm.
So,
No, and
Oh,
I
well, also,
I don't mind that at all. I don't really, and I don't think you do either. Look for, a pat on the back or great job or anything like that. Because we're all three of us professionals, we show up, we do our job, and we get paid, and we go home, just like any other professional in the world, right? But, and I don't want to be, come across as whiny, but, we're not viewed that way.
right.
And that's just the facts of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a helpful bit of information I want to throw in while it's on my mind is kind of harkening back. It's a stressful, busy day for all the parties involved. For anybody who's considering going into, doing this, playing weddings, things like that, make arrangements ahead of time before you show up to make sure you get paid the moment you show up. Because what invariably happens is you start to pack up, you do things, they're involved with the party or other things, and you may be just sitting there waiting to leave for 30, 45 minutes before someone comes and hands you the check.
Yeah.
So just in order not to make it awkward or to have any kind of resentment or anything like that, just make those arrangements. Like, here I am, I'm showing up, let's go ahead and get this out of the way so everybody's free to just do what we need to do, and hopefully have some fun with it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think to go back to what I was saying before, I think it's important for musicians, gigging musicians, to remember that when you're giving a concert, you are providing your art. You are giving an offering to the world. When you're playing a wedding gig, you're providing a service. Period. You are a service, and you clock in, clock out. That's it. So if you enter that world, don't expect much more.
Boy, that's a heck of a rant.
That was a heck of a rant.
So please hire us for weddings, because we do enjoy servicing you.
They got personal quick.
Some poor soul is going to be listening to this, about to get married, and they're going to think, well, I think we're hiring a pianist for this wedding of ours.
Right.
All right. The next part of our podcast in this episode is just going to be the three of us, actually, and we have an interesting topic to discuss, and that is amps, amplifiers, guitar amplifiers. We've been chatting about a lot of different aspects of it, from maintenance to what kind of amps to buy. And so this will just be a little bit of a taste of that. Hope you all enjoy.
I would offer just a little precursor that we are not endorsed by any name brand that might be mentioned.
But should Fishman?
I mean, seriously, but we need to be able to freely mention a lot of name brands more than likely by the time it's over.
This is true.
Yeah.
And should Fishman want to send me any trial amplifiers or just gift amplifiers, they are more than welcome.
Quilter ever feel the need to make these again and send me one?
I love that we all three have one of those now.
Yes, we do.
It's so good.
All right.
Amps.
So
let's do it.
I don't know. Solid state versus tube. Maybe a brief breakdown between the two.
Go, Boyd.
Well, this might get me on a bit of a rant, and not really meaning to. And it's nothing advocating for one or the other. But in our previous discussion about considerations when we're making well-informed purchases, we have to, acknowledge that, a lot of times solid state is more affordable than comparable tube amps. And without going too much into really the differences, between them and the perceived differences of the technology, just, tubes these days, so many tubes are the typical 12AX7s, the 6L6s, and, things of that nature that up until about pandemic, there were three, if I remember correctly, three companies in the world producing these, and the one in China had an incident, I think, of fire, and I don't think has reopened yet. The war in Ukraine has, if it hasn't shut down, it's completely hampered their production. So a lot of the tubes out in the market are coming from one Russian factory, and there for a while, I don't know if it was just the panic, but tube prices doubled and even tripled. Even in the best case scenario, tubes are expensive because of the lack of facilities producing them. Solid state is much more easily obtainable. We're not even going to talk about quality of various components. So you have to take into account, I think, do you want to make that investment in an amp? Tube amp, you're going to need probably more maintenance, but it could last you a lifetime, as opposed to solid state, which is not necessarily lesser quality. It requires less maintenance, and the components are often more inexpensively sourced. But a lot of the modern solid state amps are surface mount on their PCBs, as opposed to the old through hole. The old through hole, if a resistor or a capacitor burns out, someone who really knows what they're doing can replace that and get the amp up and going again. But so much of the surface mount stuff is not repairable these days. So do you want to invest $1,000 in a solid state amp that if something goes wrong out of warranty, you just have to look at buying a new one? So that's caused people to want to look more inexpensively at the level of solid state amps they're getting. Some people, it causes them to want to say, well, I'll pay a little bit more and get a tube amp that I can get repaired.
I think that
All
speaks
right,
to,
end of episode. That was
yeah.
it.
Boyd, you have a way with words, and every time you're done speaking, I feel like I'm not going to talk so good. Um,
Sorry.
Very good. Me
in,
Talk Pretty one day.
hey,
That's a good
when,
book. It's a funny book. Yeah, I mean, I think solid state has come a long way. I think not all solid states are created equal. As Boyd alluded to, premium solid states are just that. They're premium. Usually come with a great warranty. Um, Actually, I should have done some reading. Is Polytone back? So a
I don't
popular
know.
jazz amp, Polytone.
Great amp.
Yeah, pretty ubiquitous. I've got one right behind me somewhere. Um, that you can people work on them. I mean it's a repairable, straightforward amp. It's not a modeling amp. If anybody knows Polytone, you realize that. I shouldn't even have to say that, but there are a lot of great solid state amps out there. Uh, Paul Jones, yeah, Paul Jones bass. I had a great, very compact, great sounding amp from him. Comparable to that would be Hendrickson. But, like I said, I've had my Polytone, completely gone over by someone here in town. I'm in Memphis, by the way, and it works great. His transformers were beefed up. Um, you quickly get into those areas like Boyd was talking about, where okay, is it warranted, right? Um, is it worth it to buy this disposable amp and then just have to buy another one and another one and another one if something was to go wrong? The likelihood that something's going to go wrong, as he said, is I think kind of slim, unless you're just abusing it. But at the same time, is that affordable solid state going to give you the same tone that a tube amp is? I think there are a handful that can, but it's few and far between. The ones that are, premium, like I said, are premium. But I would like to take a minute to talk about some of it because, we all have students that want to get into quality stuff, or at least stuff that sounds good and will last them a few years before they have to upgrade, or don't have to upgrade. And again, I don't want to sound like we're endorsing one company over the other. It's just brands that I've had experience with that I recommended to students. Affordable things to get into. I think that are also interesting, have modeling capabilities. The one that I've recommended recently and often over the years is the Boss Katana. Nick, you have one, right?
that's right. At your recommendation, I pick one up, and they make different wattage levels. I think I bought the 50,
Yeah,
and
they're fantastic. They have a nice quality sounds made by Boss Roland, who is world renowned for great effects. So it's the same technology going into just an amp platform. plenty of headroom. I play pedal steel. Some of the higher headroom katanas, I've noticed pedal steel players use them before. Speaking of that, but on the other end, like the pricier ends, is Quilter,
Yeah.
who I would, we mentioned at the top of the show. Um, I would very much like to get a representative from Quilter on the show because, man, I mean, some of the best sounding solid state stuff, and now they're, for a long time now, QSC PA equipment. It's, the Q in that brand is Quilter. So, there's just tons of options out there that aren't tube that, in my opinion, were harder to come by when we were in school. You know, I mean, when we were in school 30 years ago, 25 years ago, et cetera, the modeling technology was not quite there yet. And so, a lot of and the solid state amps and or the modeling amps then, gave that sector a bad name in my opinion. And it put a lot of our generation and the next generation uh, before us, I think it left a bad taste in their mouth to recommend these amps later. But I mean, I think we're in a space now where those types of amps are just incredibly durable, useful, and they sound great, and they're lightweight, you know. We're getting older,
That's a real consideration. And to touch on, we've mentioned just in passing peripherally, names of companies. I've been really impressed when I've been on the fence about wanting to buy a product, like what's the serviceability or what's the specifications. It's not certain, it's not exactly clear maybe when I'm looking online or trying to find a manual. I maybe have a specific need. I've reached out to the companies and most of them will respond back to you like, these are some considerations you want. And I've found most of the time they're pretty honest about, trying to help you make the right decision in terms of the gear you want. And even more surprising, we have so many companies out there that are just huge names. And I've been surprised that, the name on that on that piece of equipment, the owner of that company or the designer or the person who found it is oftentimes the one that's writing me back like, holy mackerel, you have time to field these just menial questions from just people just randomly reaching out. That speaks volumes about a lot of those companies.
Yeah, for sure.
Going back to what you were saying about modeling amps and how great they are today, Bass, I obviously agree because I have one now. But I will say this, they're not great for gigs. In one aspect, you have to go to the amp to change the effect. So if you want distortion, you got to turn the knob and get distortion. If you want to clean, you got to go back to the amp and change it accordingly. So it's different than having foot pedals in front of you that you can tap in and out of quickly. So it's been great for me in the studio. It's been great for me practicing and just sort of being on my own, but it's not so great out in the, like for a live performance.
I thought some of those, not to like call you out or anything, but I think you can get some extensions to plug into the amp itself for, like have foot switches, just like you would have like to turn on your tremolo or reverb from a, Princeton or a Deluxe,
Hmm.
it just might be an add-on. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it is. Does it give you the full capabilities of
That
the
I
amp?
don't know.
Okay.
I don't have that. Yeah, and I don't want to, sound like a hypocrite or anything like that because, I mean, my favorite gigging amp is a Princeton. But that being said, Fender's new Tone Master it's called Tone Master, right?
Right. Yeah.
Line of they're essentially modeling amps. They're just modeling one specific thing, right?
Yeah.
Man, they sound great. Yeah,
Yeah.
they really do.
And they have power scaling
Yeah,
features. They're really well thought out and light. I mean, you can carry around their twin like you can a Princeton.
yeah. Nobody's carrying around a twin anymore. You know what I mean? Like that, nobody gigs with a twin. I mean, like there's no well, okay, there are places here in town that maybe my Princeton's not appropriate for. But 90% of the gigs that I have, right, if it's a big place, then it's got sound. You know what I mean? There's I can mic my amp and run it through the house sound and it's fine. You know, it's completely fine. The stage volume is fine out of my Princeton. There's just no problems, right? I mean, now if it makes you happy to to carry around a twin, you know, 85 pounds of, glorious tone. I get it, but come on, you know, I mean, I have a Bassman 50, and I recently got a speaker cabinet made for it, a 210 speaker cabinet. Now, I can break that up and carry it in on some of these shows especially when I need more headroom for my pedal steel. But it's sort of a special occasion or just something that I want to do to bring that thing out and have fun, you know?
I know we have a little bit more ground to cover, but this is not ranty. It is a little ranty, but Bass mentioned a good word, the disposability aspect of so many things we get. And it's not just guitars or some of the surface mount components in, say, pedals or amplifiers. I mean, it's just the world we live in. Like, my refrigerator goes bad. There's not much, call to get a repairman in these days and keep that fridge going for another 20 years. It's like, oh, the fridge went bad after 10 years, buy you another fridge. I do have a bit of a problem with that idea of such disposability and not being able to repair things. But sometimes we equate that idea of I'm stepping up into the world of tube amps, and that's going to give me a little bit more longevity. But sometimes we have to think about, not all of them are point to point wired, meaning it's straight wires going to a resistor, a circuit, a tube. A lot of times, modern tube amps, as expensive as they are, still have PCB boards in them. And if they're surface mount and they fail, you're probably going to be buying a whole new board to drop in there, which on one hand is great because, if you go to a repair tech who does the through hole stuff, it's time consuming. A PCB board, even as expensive as it may be, is probably going to save you money just replacing that whole board as opposed to having a tech dismantle things. But there is still within a lot of tube amps this, potential for failure and having to have things replaced. I know that a company that I've worked with before, again, I'm not going to call people out or deride anything, but I bought this amp and spent a lot of money on it at the time, and within 3 months, a component failed. They stood up for it though, and this is before they had local service centers. They were still fairly small. One of my friends who was a tech reached out to the guy, and his proprietary materials, his schematics for that amp, he sent him so he could repair it and then pay him for repairing it. That amp, once it was repaired, I didn't even have to have it serviced for 25 years, just routine maintenance. When it started failing, I was so afraid I'm going to be without that amp. I bought whatever their current incarnation of that was way more advanced. Same thing, within the first month, something failed, but they honored it under warranty. The difference there was a lot more of the PCB components that had to go into being replaced. And I want to say this is, again, solid state is not any lesser quality than tube amps. It's all about the quality of what goes into it. So PCBs, things like that, are a common part of life, and they're normally very reliable. But I think it is worth it to do your research before you go into these scenarios to make sure you get that return of investment that you want.
So it sounds like there's not much maintenance the average user can uh, expect when they have a solid state amplifier. It's especially one that's built more recently. It's like good luck and just hope it doesn't break. Are there any preventative measures that someone could take? Moving the amp, working with the amp to, keep it from breaking?
The biggest thing I can say preventative wise is exercise those pots. So like for me, I mean, I have amps, and I think I've mentioned this in previous episodes that, I like a high headroom amp, so I can go from one platform to the next. And oftentimes I'll set mine and then forget it, especially if it's one that I used here in the studio. Maybe the ones I gig with, I'm turning up the volumes and things like that. But oftentimes I leave them alone. But those pots where you turn, the mids, the highs, the lows, the volumes, the gains, every now and then you just need to work those because they're going to get some corrosion in them and get scratchy. And the more you work them, the less likely they are to maintain a certain amount of scratchiness that would require the pot being disassembled or getting in there and squirting, some deoxide in it or something like that. And I think that's the case with all, amps. Doesn't matter if it's tube or solid state. But oftentimes when you're dealing with these PCBs that they're putting in a lot of modern amps, you have these components directly mounted to the PCB. There's not a lot of wires to connect, say, a potentiometer or an input jack to the PCB board itself. They're often soldered right to it. And so many times, because those PCB boards are disposable, the jacks oftentimes are plastic. And if you've ever been on a gig where, you're working background music, people are wandering around, every now and then someone's going to kick your cable or kick your amp. And I've got a really reliable solid state amp that I use as an acoustic amp. Someone just walked straight into that so hard that it bent the jack that was in the amp. If that had been a plastic mounted jack, forget about it. That amp would have been toast right then. But it was metal and it wasn't soldered to the PCB, and that thing was as solid as it could be. Had to get a new cable after that because it wasn't reliable, but a $20 cable versus a $150 PCB replacement, I mean, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Goodness gracious. So let's say folks are wondering what kind of sort of entry level amp you might recommend. What would you say?
Um, I love a Katana. They've done good things with the Fender Mustang series as well. There's different levels of that. There's a company that is making really affordable entry level tube amps. Now, granted, you do have to keep in mind that it's a tube and it's mounted to those surface mount PCBs for affordability. But the Stage Right series by Monoprice, I think it is. If you want tube sound at an affordable price, that's not a bad route to go. I find it, I don't think anybody in the tube amp industry is really able to compete with them in terms of the price they're putting out for the low wattage type amps, bedroom level, and heck, even they had a 15-watt version, which is really comparable to like the AC 15s and some of those amps. Yeah, nobody could touch them in terms of price. And from what I've seen, they've been really reliable. But I mean, there's a lot of good equipment out there that's not your major brands you think about. It just takes a lot of research to really dig in and find what's right for you.
I'm a fan of the katana, and on a negative side, I really wish that. I mean, on the one hand, I kind of get it, but on the other hand, I don't. I really wish that Fender would rethink their pricing for their Tone Master line.
Oh man.
I think they could really get a lot of people into some quality stuff if they could see a way to bring down that price.
Yeah.
Because right now they're competing with themselves, in my opinion. I mean, it's like because you're always going to have the market who wants the tube amp, you know. I mean, I'm not an expert in this department at all, but I mean, to me, it seems like, you don't want to price yourself. I mean, I kind of get it. They don't want to put a price on it that says it's an inferior quality, right? I mean, I get that, but it seems like a good way to get somebody into a great sounding amp because they do sound great,
Mhm.
lightweight, and they don't have all that goes into a tube amp, that everybody knows and loves. Um, but again, they just sound fantastic. But if I'm going to pay what they're asking for the Tone Master, I'm just gonna buy a tube Princeton. I'm just gonna buy a tube Deluxe. I'll spend a little bit extra because it's not that much more. Now if I want to buy a twin or a super, and I want that sound as good as a modeling situation can get me, but I don't want the weight, then yeah, I'll buy a Tone Master because I think they sound really good. But I think they're shooting themselves in the foot. But anyway,
Well, there's two things I have to add to that. One is when we're talking about doing research, Jonathan, one of your amp techs there in Memphis put out a great series uh, a year or two ago, like from a tech's perspective. What is like an ideal amp to get for repairability versus cost,
hmm
longevity, and he broke it down as like amps under $500
yeah,
and amps under $1,000, and he talked about teasing one like more higher end $1,500, $2,000. I don't know if he's done that one yet because I haven't kept up the way I should. But there's some good resources for snussing out what would be sussing out what would be good options from that kind of longevity standpoint. So I think it's worth it to do a Google search, do your research in that regard. Um, some other things to probably consider, since you're going down that rabbit hole of certain amp brands pricing comparably to whatever their tube model would be. I don't know how much this plays into it, but I had a friend a long time ago when CDs were still a thing, and he was trying to sell CDs at his shows. And this is when you had your music stores where CDs were where you went to buy, and typical price of a CD was $18 to $20. And of course, he goes to a show selling his CDs. He's pricing them $18 to $20. He wasn't selling a whole lot of them, and he had this backlog of CDs in his garage and under his bed, much like I still do. For some reason, I'm still holding on to all that. Uh,
me
but
too.
he decided to, like, you know what? I'm not going to sell it for $20. I'm going to sell them for 10. And he put them out there, and he where before he might sell 10 CDs a night at $20, he would go to a show, price them at $10, and sell like 40. So he was making his money off of volume. And maybe that's where some of that lies with that type of technology is, yeah, like you said, if I could buy a, Tone Master Princeton versus a tube Princeton, I'm probably going to buy the tube Princeton all day long. But you price that, Tone Master because they're really good, less substantially less than that. Oh, that's a real, selling point there, and especially for people who are wanting to get to that next level with their gear.
Yeah, I don't mind plugging our local Amp Tech's YouTube channel either. Psionic Audio with a P. At least that's how I'm pronouncing it. Boyd, is that correct?
That's how I pronounce it. I love Lyle.
Yeah, Psionic Audio on YouTube. Really great source for everything that we've been talking about here.
I've learned a lot from him, and especially with me getting into more than just routine maintenance repairs. He's pretty good about letting folks know where their limitations are, when it comes to doing certain things on amps. He's got a lot of great videos.
He's rebuilt and or modeled all of my amps, or sorry, modded.
So I think it's important since we have all
Um,
kinds of listeners to mention that the amps that we've been talking about are for electric guitar, and there are acoustic guitars, there are classical guitars, there are all kinds of amps out there for the type of guitar that you play. And so don't forget that there's a whole other line of amps that can project your acoustic or classical sound. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to Fishman and their Loudbox line.
yeah, that's great, Nick. But about the twin, the Fender Twin. So
This reminds me of a conversation I had about, I don't know, 10 years ago with a local rocker. And he was talking about his guitar collection and his amps and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I got an amp. And he goes, well, what do you got? And I was like, well, I got a Fishman Loudbox Mini. He's like, yeah, but I mean, like, what's your, like, your amp, the one you rock with? And I was like, oh, I just have my electric go through my Loudbox. And he's like, what?
Nick, I
None.
gotta say, it has an impressive sound. You had I can't remember your guest's name that came in. He borrowed my B bender to play, and I think he had the option of playing like through my matchless or yours, and oh my god, what he played through your Fishman was just glorious with that guitar.
Dude,
I love the loud boxes. I
yeah,
think they're great.
for clean tone, not just for classical, but for jazz on my archtop, it sounds fantastic. I think it sounds really good. But for classical, I've used it for concertos. I've used it for uh, gigs where I've been embedded in the orchestra. I've played it for weddings. I've played it for a variety of applications, and I just think it sounds really great with the classical guitar. It's got, even the smallest model has two inputs, quarter-inch jack and an XLR. It's got a Bluetooth setting. So for example, if you're playing background music and you want to take a 10-15 minute break, you can turn on the Bluetooth and get your phone out and just play some background music, to keep the music going while you go take a break. I
That's a great
Can
feature. I've never seen one with that feature on it.
can
Oh,
you do use that Bluetooth compatibility to play in like tracks to play over and things like that as well?
yes, and I've done that. I've done jazz gigs where I've had iReal Pro playing in the background, and it's been accompanying me. Yeah, and it works great.
Wow.
Yeah, the
All right,
volume
we're going to
set.
talk about that later, Nick. But
Yeah, the volume setting is your
yeah,
phone.
we'll have this.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it's great for singer songwriters because you can plug in with your guitar into the quarter-inch jack, and then the mic goes into the XLR, and there's a separate set of dials for each. The only thing I'll complain about is that the quarter-inch input has a much wider array of EQ settings, whereas the XLR input does not. I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they wouldn't have the same on each side, but that's the way it is. Plus, it has a DI out. And um, I just think, and it's light. It's light and it's small. Like the Loudbox Mini is very small. So they make a variety of them, but I just think they're awesome. So if you're an acoustic guitarist or a classical guitarist and are looking for even, like, I could call it entry level because it's not incredibly expensive, although it has gone up in the past couple of months, but it's a great option.
I want to cover a little bit more, and it'll only take a minute. But
Let's do it.
I'm going to shout this out
So
because
good.
I mean, and anything like this, honestly, it's not just well, there are other things out there like this, but like this is my backup amp now. All right. And
Yeah, let me
honestly, sometimes it's just my amp, you know.
let me
Yeah,
Never gonna
I've got one of those, and I've got this one as well, which is now a backup for the backup, and it's
yeah.
glorious.
I mean, this goes in my gig bag anytime because like if my Princeton were to have problems, right, I can just unplug the speaker from my Princeton and then plug it into here, right? Or if there's house sound, I can go direct from this out. You know, it's got a balanced out, it's got speaker out. There's no need to adjust It has it automatically adjusts from 4 to 8 to 16 ohms, so it doesn't really matter what cabinet you have. It'll adjust to it automatically.
And that is the
Uh,
great part about that one is the versatility of your outs.
yeah,
There's plenty of times that I've played into house sound and I don't have a cab or an amp on stage, and having this, yeah, same guy. And
yep,
this is when I wrote to him. I was like, I need to know about this. And he gave me everything and more I ever wanted to know. And this has served me so well in that regard and super affordable. I mean, I think
yeah, for sure.
$99 for this. And I
Yeah.
get
I mean,
so much use.
these are discontinued, and anytime I see them on Reverb, if it's a decent price, I'm gonna be picking up an extra one.
Let me just take a moment to explain what y'all just showed our viewers and listeners because I did not know what the
Everyone,
heck what that was up until about a year or so ago. So um, we have been talking about the word amplifier, and that's kind of a misnomer because I think a lot of people think the box that the sound comes out is an amplifier, but if you're plugging your guitar directly into said box, what you have is a combo. You have a combination of the speakers that are putting out the sound and an amplifier that is taking the signal from your guitar and amplifying it and sending it through the speakers. And gentlemen, correct me if I'm erring in any moment of this, but the what Mike and Jonathan just showed you were the amplifier portion of that setup in its own contained box. And so the guitar will plug into that. And then from that amplified sound, that signal will go into just a set of speakers. And so it looks a little different. There's no power needed. It just goes into this box with some speakers. And then, it's called a cabinet often, or a cab. And that is the thing. And so instead of having the guitar going straight into the combo amp, like the loud box that I was just talking about, or the Princeton that Bass was talking about, or the Katana or anything like that, you got the guitar going into this pedal sized amplifier, and then that's going into a cab.
We are interacting on Zoom, and I kind of forget that many of our listeners are going to be listening to us just on the audio. So, yeah, Nick, you said it perfectly well. I think for those who weren't able to see what we were holding up on screen, it's like what we would do with a piggyback amp. We think about having the cabinet versus that head on top of it, but instead of it being that big head that's as wide as the cabinet, these amps we were holding up by, I might as well say it, Pat Quilter, are pedal sized. They just go on the board
yeah,
and they sound glorious.
yeah. I mean, and this has got if I'm running through a 4 ohm cabinet, this Interblock 45, that would give it its maximum capability, 45 watts. Now, granted, it's solid state watts, but I mean, it's fantastic. It's as loud as I will ever need. And Quilters just goes up from there. But they're not the only ones that make it by a long shot. There's a lot of companies that make these pedal size power amps. Um, so yeah, look into them. They're fantastic for backup amps. I used to carry, depending on the gig, I tried to carry a backup amp to every gig, but especially let's just say at a high paying gig, right? That a lot's at stake, right? You carry a backup amp just in case something happens, right? Well, this has now become my backup amp because, man, it just sounds fantastic and it's light. You just throw it in your gig bag, leave it there and forget about it.
Well, think about how many times you recorded in the studio. That was your amp. It wasn't a backup. That's
Yeah,
just
for
the
sure.
amp you're tracking with. And same thing with that Phantom block that I picked up. That, yeah, granted, it doesn't run into a cab. You need to run into house sound or a DAW or something like that. But it has all that same glorious sound. $99. It works as a perfect interface and go between and gives you the functionality of an actual amplifier. It's not just a DI box. You can control the gain and the tone and the volume, and wow, it's remarkable.
I think it's important also to highlight the fact that when you do go through pedal amp and cabinet combo, you're able to change out one or the other. So you're able to kind of dial in your sound, experiment more. You're able to, you know, kind of modify uh, as you want. Whereas if you buy a combo, you're kind of locked into that. The amp and the speaker are built into each other. There's not much you can do apart from opening it up and changing out speakers on your own, which a lot of people are kind of afraid of. The other thing I wanted to say, to do a callback to this whole disposability conversation from earlier, it just so happens that I have that Quilter 45 as well, and I broke it. I accidentally, I plugged in. I was in this situation where instead of using the balanced speaker out, I plugged it into the cab out and blew it out, and sent it back to Quilter, and it was like $80 later. That thing was back in action, and they were communicative, and so I didn't have to buy a new one.
It's a great company. Like really, that's all I've ever heard about it is, they stand behind their stuff. The service is great. You get a person to talk to. It's nice.
And Pat Quilter was one of the ones that when I referenced how amazing it is that some of the owners and developers of the company will write back to you. I wrote a simple question about that little phantom block, like where is kind of the most neutral EQ setting on that one tone knob, and he's the one that wrote me back and told me where to set it to find that flat response. It wasn't at noon 50%. I can't remember if he said it was 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock, but he's like, this is how I designed it, this is what you want to know. Like you said, very communicative.
We're basically going to have to rename this episode "The Guys from Pluck That Drool Over Quilter Products."
That's not a lie.
Well, I think that was a pretty decent dose of amp talk. We've covered the differences between solid state and tube amps.
But wait, Nick, we didn't get into the iridium. Like we got this
Oh,
whole type of amp things going.
okay, please.
I'm kidding.
Oh, I was gonna say,
The
yeah,
amp simulator pedals. You know what I mean? Like, which actually we should make a distinction. Like what we're talking about here with the Quilter things, these actually are power amps. And then you have this whole other world of amp simulation that are not
oh wow.
great, but they're not actual power amps.
Well, and that just means the rabbit hole is even deeper in this conversation. Maybe we'll get to it in a later episode. I hope we do. Yeah, so we covered the differences between solid state and tube amps, also the difference between a pedal amp and cab versus a combo amp. We talked about a couple of different brands that we might recommend. Uh, Sadly, if you have a solid state amp, especially one of the more entry level ones, you're not too great at circuitry and it breaks, you're kind of screwed. So you got to get a new one. And I think that's about.
Well, I mean, we restrained ourselves honestly if we wanted to just talk about our favorite amps, tube amps and all that. I mean, like that, we would be here forever.
Well, if you get two guitarists in the room, you get to talking about any particular aspect of our gear. It's just going to be a very long conversation. Well, that was another episode of Pluck That. Thank you for listening. And be sure to check out the next one. Would also invite our listeners and viewers to comment and leave feedback either in our YouTube videos or sending an email to pluckthatguitarpodcast@gmail.com. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.